Hello, hello, and welcome to another ohmTown Daily News Show. I am Mayor Watt, and that 9 o'clock dong means it's time for the ohmTown Daily News Show. And it's Monday, February 27th, 2023. Tonight's episode is Season 2, Episode 58, Told to Turn Toward Turnips to Tackle Tough Times. Hey, I did it. Tonight we're going to have 11 articles, starting with a COVID and flu test, but a bankruptcy. Kentucky AG is investigating wokeness of banks in a state already banning wokeness in banks. There's spice, there's worms, water, and details. No, it's details. A missing Chinese billionaire is, quote-unquote, assisting authorities. It's time to turn to turnips to tackle tough times, according to Teresa. Fox News anchor says that they've been banned from covering the Dominion lawsuit. I know a skating rink that follows the same philosophy. Remote workers are still moving away from office. Dilbert's gone full derp. Federal judge handcuffs a 13-year-old. Rand Paul is calling for declassification of documents that show where COVID came from. Cough, cough, Chinese lab. Cough, cough. And a man documents an excessive list of insane rules plastered all over their Hamptons Airbnb rental. Let's get into today's news. Hello, hello. Hey. What's going on? My camera is not working.
Well, exactly. I can't see you.
That might actually be good. There we go. Hey, I'm Mayor Watt. At least I'm wearing his underwear. That is ohmTown.com, and the voice that you heard from the ether, the one, the only, the AI from on high. Want to say hi?
Good evening, ohmTown citizens.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay, so this is weird. I actually updated the software, but like a week ago. And now all of a sudden things are going hinky with the whatever. You know what? I'm going to change my lights just for that. Might as well. Okay, so anyway, this is the... Man, you know, this Ohio thing has really just taken the wind out of my sails, because I normally say, hey, look at this train wreck. And now it's just always too soon. So what do? Let's just get into the news. Oh, by the way, we're moving a little bit. Look, the new follower goal is at 87%. A lot of people say, don't worry about that kind of stuff. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. But those same people are people that don't have to worry about that stuff. Don't have to worry about that stuff. And I really don't. I mean, I do this for fun. So if you hear my voice and you want to come and hang out, go over to twitch.tv/ohmTown. After the fact, it all gets moved over to YouTube, into the podcast and whatnot. And there's a Discord, and we're doing work still on ohmTown, by the way. I've got some more changes to streamline the flow of information. The search engine right now is actually limited to 12 months in a rolling 12-month period. To speed up the search, and since we've only been really in existence as a show publicly for around a year, I'm just kind of locking it down, but I can expand that as time and resources and out whatever as we move forward. That said, we've already selected about 11 articles. We're going to keep on charging through all of these. Today is not probably for most people, it's not going to be a light and airy news day with a lot of fun and giggles and all of that kind of stuff. But sometimes you have to hit these hurdles. Although I'm going to be as snarky as I can possibly be tonight, just as probably a coping mechanism. But let's see how high the soapbox gets. We're going to start with this doozy. FDA authorizes first COVID-19 and flu test, but its maker files for bankruptcy. So they got to the finish line and then exploded. I don't know how to define this any other way. The regulatory decision comes too late for the diagnostics developer, which is filed for bankruptcy protection. So congratulations, you lost. Lucira Health now has the first FDA-authorized diagnostic that detects the novel coronavirus and influenza in a single test. But the regulatory decision comes too late for the diagnostics developer, which has filed for bankruptcy. Frank Vinlewen, I guess is their name, wrote this article. It comes from medcitynews.com, which is a new resource. And it says cough, fever, breathing difficulty could signal a COVID-19 infection. It could also be the flu, and Lucira Health Diagnostic is now the first one authorized by the FDA to identify the culprit virus in a single test, yielding results in about 30 minutes. That actually seems like an extraordinary long time. I don't know about you, but the COVID-19 speed test, right? How long does it take? 15 minutes?
It takes 15 minutes, but it actually takes a little longer than that because there's some prep time. So, but I don't know if this is 30 minutes to read the results once you've collected the sample.
Yeah, I don't know if it's 30 minutes to go over to the store and get the test and then drive back and then do all that. I'm not quite sure because I haven't actually read all about this one. But in 2020, Emeryville, California, Lucira was the first company awarded emergency authorization for its at-home COVID-19 test. That regulatory decision sparked rapid company growth to meet surging test demand, and in 2021, the company was able to raise nearly $160 million in an upsized IPO, initial public offering, for those who don't know what an IPO is. A new Lucira diagnostic for both COVID and flu followed, and the company proceeded to manufacture it in anticipation of future consumer demand. Both of the company's tests won CE marks in Europe last May. That same month, Lucira submitted its FDA application seeking authorization for the combination product for prescription at-home use of the test. In November, FDA recommended proceeding with a review of the combination test for point-of-care use, and Lucira said in its third quarter 2022 financial report, hey, we're moving forward, we're getting things done. TikTok, last October, Lucira, hot on the heels of their $160 million IPO apparently, laid off 25% of its staff. Hey, thank you for doing all that fundamental research, but we're going to let you go to run our runway a little bit further, and begin exploring strategic alternatives that included a potential sale of the company. Kind of weird, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of piece it together. I mean, I've heard that FDA approvals take a while, but it's kind of hard to figure out why right after this IPO all of this happened.
And I don't know about competition. So what really happened? It said while the test went on to receive regulatory authorizations in Canada and New Zealand, it still awaited an FDA decision. So they kind of ground to a halt. They did the hurry up and wait. In December, NASDAQ sent Lucira a delisting notice due to its ailing stock price. In the bankruptcy announcement, Lucira president and CEO Eric Engelson noted the toll taken on the company by weaker testing demand. So they ramped up just in time for it to not be needed, because the vaccines were basically doing their job. The only people that really needed to be tested were wingnuts that chose not to get vaccinated, and those who have a medical condition that would prevent them from getting the vaccine and then falling prey to the wingnuts who don't get the vaccine. Oh, imagine how society works. Anyway, this combined with slower anticipated regulatory approval for the new test developed for the 2022-2023 flu season led to insufficient revenue and capitalization to offset expenditures. So they literally drove themselves into the ground, even post firing 25%. Yeah, this is what happens when the plan for something is hampered by, I don't know, other people that are actually providing a solution versus the detection of the problem. So I guess chalk one up for fundamental research in virology that led to the vaccine, and take one down for, pour one out, I guess you could say. Pour one out for Lucira. Maybe they've done something novel in their process of creating this test that will be able to be sold to somebody else that can provide this as a dual test at a better price point than Lucira. Unfortunately, investors are taking one on the chin for this. In COVID-19, the diagnostic correctly identified 100% of negative samples and 88.3% of positive samples, and the Lucira test was able to detect 99.9% of negative influenza B samples, but this strain is rarer than influenza A. So I suppose it was pretty effective in correctly identifying during clinical trials, but still 30 minutes. Maybe there are people out there that are even faster at bringing it to market, and faster at that diagnostic test.
Yeah,
It's
I
kind of
guess I'm
interesting.
thinking though they were the first COVID test, so maybe they're onto something. But again, maybe somebody will pick up this test and be able to improve upon it.
Yeah. Well, I had heard of Lucira during the pandemic's ramp up. It's kind of a bummer that if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't even know that they exist at this point. You only have the major vaccine providers. Here, let me, before I get into the second article, I'll remember to post this into the chat so that it's in the VOD, and it'll be in the show notes like all of them. Everything is currently up to date, both in the podcast and on YouTube, and as well here on the Twitch channel, but it's the source of all of the, well, how the sausage is made. It starts with Twitch. Okay, so let's move on to the next article, and it's the Kentucky AG is investigating wokeness of banks his state has already banned for wokeness. This article is over in abovethelaw.com, and the little snippet that's provided is, to what end? Well, votes, baby. And that's really what it's all about at this point. This is actually over at dealbreaker.com, but it was originally over at Above the Law. The article was written by John Shazar. And let's see here. Yeah, I don't know how to take that picture. But anyway, like a lot of red states, albeit unlike any other state with a Democratic governor, so far as we are aware, Kentucky has decided to do something about the scourge that is ravaging our streets and bringing the American people to their very knees. Financial service firms that dare utter, under any circumstances, the words environmental, social, or governance. Okay.
I'm not sure why governance fits in with the other two, but
because you can't allow oversight, you can't allow governance of corporations, because that is downright un-American to limit abuse and the power indifference that allows a provider to do whatever the hell they want to those mere mortals that have to ask for something. So this generated the now predictable shrugs from Wall Street, even after Kentucky Treasurer Allison Ball photocopied West Virginia's list of verboten banks and asset managers, including, predictably, ESG, poster whipping boy, and the world's largest money manager, for what it's worth, BlackRock, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, and a whole bunch of other companies with suspiciously and ominously funny sounded foreign names. So, tempest in a teapot, sorted then, you might expect. Well, Kentucky won't do any more business with those companies, although public pension funds could if they wanted, and they do. So, what's really going on here?
I mean, do they actually have a list of like banned banks? And what were their criteria for banning them?
So it says here, and so it's probably would have been, except Attorney General Daniel Cameron would like to have Bashar's job one day, and is maybe worried that Ball might too, and so it's unfair for her to get to hog all the woke bashing. So he's sending subpoenas all over Wall Street demanding any documents with the words climate, environmental, or environmental in them, including to two banks, JPMC and Citi, that have already been blacklisted by the state. So what's the purpose of this? Right? You want to re-ask that question?
Well, I mean, what's the point of having do they really have a list? And what's the criteria? Is the criteria that they mention the word climate or environmental and that's enough for a ban?
Apparently, that's what Kentucky Treasurer Allison Ball photocopied West Virginia's list of verboten banks and asset managers, and there's a link. It's over at dealbreaker.com. Fourth poorest state in U.S. commits to paying more for financial services, but there's this list apparently of verboten banks and asset managers. I hesitate to follow these links because I'm talking about a particular article. I've been considering the idea of pre the show actually just opening up a stream and referring to it as office hours, where I will kind of go through the news, but not necessarily, and select some of the articles, but not necessarily highlight those articles while talking about it, just talk about the news. I think that would be fun and extend the time frame for which we can interact with everybody. The AI will probably not be engaged in this. It'll just be the mayor of ohmTown doing office hours. That said, yeah, I guess there is a list. Maybe we can go digging around and we can find this list and talk about it maybe tomorrow if it is relevant to the news, or maybe if there's a soft spot in the news, we can do a deeper dive in this.
Well, and ultimately, isn't this hurting the citizens of the state? Or just the state finances overall? Because I'm assuming if you have any major companies, they're probably going to ban them. So really, who's left?
Yeah. So I don't want to read the article verbatim, but it says, in response, the Kentucky Bankers Association sued, calling the Attorney General's 24 demands for information and 20 separate demands for documents an amazing overreach. In effect, according to the bankers' legal filings, the demands were creating an ongoing state surveillance system. The bankers further claimed that the Attorney General was violating the right to free speech and freedom to associate, both of which, in this particular instance, if it's coming from the state, is a violation of their right to free speech and freedom to associate. Probably the one time in this last week where people have actually used that properly in a context referencing free speech and freedom to associate. For crying out loud, people. Free speech has nothing to do with getting kicked off of a social network by that social network. It's your free speech means you criticize the government from any level of the government, and they disappear you to a black site to ask you about who your friends are, and they don't do it in a, hey, I'm going to tickle you and put you in the comfy chair. It's they waterboard you and shock your... I'm going to leave that all alone. Anyway, so the bankers further claim that the Attorney General is violating their rights, and I say they are. That said, I do want companies to have oversight, and financial institutions more so, because there is a power imbalance here. There's no bargaining. It's like health. There's no bargaining with, do I decide, should I get this procedure or die? In this case, if I need to do something financial and it's a volume of money that's well outside my annual income, I either have to live in a box down by the river for 30 years saving up, or I get a mortgage. Why somebody saying anything about climate, environmental, what are the other ones up here? There were more quotes. Governance, social, environmental, anything having to do with society, basically led to a banned service provider, which hobbles competition, which means that nobody gets maximum benefit from competing services vying for your dollars and interest. So I will never get this, but there's a lot of this whole partisanship going on, where if you're not on my side, then you are a fundamental threat to my existence and to my party, which basically it's turning into political gang warfare, where people have to pick a side, or they become a victim in the streets. It's all pretty shocking. So to what end? It looks like it's political.
I like this at the end. It just says, if any other woke Wall Streeter wants to throw a few bucks at Cameron for Governor 23, he's no more likely to say no than any of the other hypocrites.
I like that. Wow. And this it comes out of above the law, so that snark is always palpable. Let's move on to the next article so that we don't spend too long. Although we do enjoy having a longer conversation about stuff. We try to get 11 articles done in an hour, which is sometimes rough. This next article is over.
Once.
We've only done it once?
I think so.
Maybe. Okay, so the next article is in the Warcrafters channel, Spice, Worms, and Water. First details on survival systems in the upcoming Dune MMO. I really wish that the Harry Potter Legacy world would have been an MMO, but it's a single player. And Dune as an MMO, it's really a single player type of existence, and it's an MMO. It's like Opposite World has been turned into these games. Survival games can be a grind. Just ask anyone who tried to craft a splint for a broken leg while baking in the sun, dying of hunger and suffering from intestinal parasites. Oh, you've tried my cooking. Not that survival fans don't love finding themselves in those kind of situations, but the trials of hardcore survival games aren't for everyone. So I'm not going to read the whole article, but I am going to tease you into going over to the article. Go over to pcgamer.com, and this article is written by Christopher Livingston. Again, I love that name. Dune Awakening will focus? I've just created a new word. Dune Awakening will focus on a few tight core survival mechanics like shelter, traversal, and water, says creative director Joel Bylos. I'm waiting for this. I love the Dune novels. Frank Herbert wrote the core of it, did all of the world building. The movies, I've enjoyed every single version of Dune. The latest version is spectacular, and I'm waiting for the second half of it, if it is a second half and not just part 2 of 3 or 4 or 5. I hope that it gets extended beyond that, because there is a whole lot of historical Dune world building that Dune itself and the movies don't even touch on. They don't even hint at how much back history there are for all of us to enjoy. Anyway, the author says that they're not a big MMO player, but they've played plenty of survival games, so they were curious how deep and intricate Dune Awakening survival systems were. And they already know from the books and films that staying alive in the desert planet of Arrakis, aka Dune, is extremely challenging considering the deadly heat, the fact that everyone has to wear a still suit, which the AI is probably not familiar with the still suit, no. And you can't just send me an error message. So
I am not familiar with the still suit.
the still suit is this really cool full body suit except for the head up, and it has a permeable membrane, and so when you sweat or pee or anything, moisture is wicked away from you, and your motions filter it through to another layer that captures it, purified water, and you can sip it from the body, from your suit, and aka a still suit. Get it?
Like a water still?
Like a water still, yeah. Where the impurities end up, I don't know. I don't recall reading where the impurities end up. It might be like an airplane where they just drop blue ice periodically. So when you're running through the desert from a sandworm, maybe, you just kind of leave a little a pellet behind. And then you get tracked by somebody and they find out where you are because that little pellet. I've said too much. Maybe I've spoiled this game now. Anyway, the still suit recycles your body's moisture. And you have to outrun these sandworms, and hopefully they don't eat you and everything else around you, because they're huge. They're huge. But everything is all about the spice. And the spice transforms people and raises consciousness and allows the Spacing Guild to traverse pretty much any distance, as far as I know. And just by folding space. It's pretty amazing. And then there's so much more. I love the idea of this, although I think that I can't picture just how deep this is going to go on Dune. So we'll see. They talk about sand crafts, but that's just the crafting concept. Crafting is another big part of the survival genre, and Bylos explained how crafting will vary from how it works in other Funcom multiplayer survival game like Conan Exiles, which I really dig Conan Exiles, which, by the way, is an equally sand-bound game. You're basically just surrounded by sand, even in Conan Exiles. In one part, in another part, there's jungle and stuff like that, but that won't happen on Dune Awakening. So it says, for example, if you have information that a botanical testing station somewhere in the desert was experimenting with a certain kind of technology, you'll head out there to find that schematic. So the crafting is a little more bespoke, a little less tech tree driven, and a little more exploration driven. But I don't know. If it's going to be written in stone, har, pun intended, then I don't know how expansive the tech and crafting is going to get, because the world doesn't really have that much unless they created stuff from whole cloth all on their own.
Or if they go to other planets or something, because, I'm thinking of the landscape in the Dune movie. There's not a lot there.
Right. And there are several worlds in the Dune cinematic universe. Well, in the universe, in the literature there is, but they weren't really highlighting anything about other planets so much in the new movie either. But in the movies, the older movies, they did. So this is going to be a fun game, at least to watch turn out. Like, I'm going to be interested in what this has to offer. And I'm sure it'll be fun to watch here on Twitch. Let's move on to the next article. This one is in the Hatch Ideas channel, and it's about business. We spoke about this pretty briefly a while back. Bao Fan is a missing Chinese billionaire that's apparently assisting authorities. I always throw up air quotes, assisting authorities. It's kind of like, your parents telling you to go do something, like take out the trash, and you're assisting your parents taking out the trash. In this case, Bao Fan, missing Chinese billionaire assisting authorities firm, says the disappearance this month renewed concerns of potential crackdown on finance and tech figures. And maybe it's true. It's a BBC.com article written by Peter Hoskins, and it's talking about what little is known, which is he disappeared 11 days ago. He's the CEO and billionaire CEO at that, China Renaissance Holdings. He's the founder of that organization. The firm's shares slumped after he went missing, but rose on Monday when apparently, like a meerkat, he kind of popped up and said, "Hey, I'm helping authorities," and then went back down into the hole. The company will duly cooperate and assist with any lawful request from the relevant PRC authorities if and when made. I'm sure they're already made, and of course they're going to follow the PRC authorities. In late 2020, Alibaba founder Jack Ma also disappeared from public view for 3 months. I wonder if that's the time frame where you assist the authorities. After making comments critical of market regulators, he had been due to publicly list his digital payments firm Ant Financial, which would have most likely made him the richest man in China. Mr. Bao's disappearance also comes after a series of cases of high-profile Chinese executives going missing as part of the Chinese President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. I guess the corruption of who's actually in power. So I guess power imbalance has different context to different people. Like, $1 million to me is significant, but it isn't to a billionaire. Just like asking to get a job somewhere is significant to somebody who doesn't have a job, but disappearing a billionaire when you're the leader of the country isn't a big deal when you have that much power.
Well, I'd say to the public it might be a big deal. Or maybe outside the country it might be a big deal.
Hey, just because it raises my eyebrows doesn't mean that anybody else's eyebrows are getting raised. Maybe everybody else is sitting there going, "This is normal." Some of the things that I have seen, I saw a video in a Chinese factory where somebody did something and everyone else just kind of stood around until a manager said something, and then they took action. I was astonished at how compliant, or I guess, I don't know how oblivious wasn't really the word, because they knew what was going on. And I'm just shocked that that took place. I'm not surprised that other people might know that it's happening, but not have any ability to say anything, even publicly. They're not going to be sitting online, rocking the boat. To me, it's actually weird that they didn't go to the authorities. China Renaissance Holdings, whoever it was that was managing after Bao Fan disappeared, made a public statement without going to the authorities first, thus literally raising awareness about the disappearance of the CEO, which is probably frowned upon. Follow the chain of command, folks. So let's move on, if you don't mind. Let's just kind of keep chugging through the news. The next article is in the Hatch Ideas channel as well. This is Eat Turnips During Vegetable Shortage, suggests Teresa Coffee. Or is it Kofi? I'm not sure. I think it's coffee. Cabinet minister says consumers should, quote unquote, cherish homegrown produce as shops limit sales of some items. We had another article that was highlighting this from, it's either pronounced Little or Lidl, depending on where you are from. But I'm sure that Teresa Coffee is not having a problem getting whatever vegetables she so desires. But the Environmental Secretary, Teresa Coffee, suggested turnips could be a suitable alternative while other vegetables remain in short supply. This kind of just speaks to my idea about vertical farming. You can pretty much grow anything in vertical farms. All you have to do is manage them, and if more people do it, even in these small, hamlets all dotted all throughout, pretty much every country has the ability to go vertical farming. You can grow so much straight up that a building, a massive farm basically can be put inside a 2-story building. You just have to go from floor to ceiling and run the water through it, and there's zero evaporation, literally zero evaporation. Everything gets captured inside the building. You don't have to use soil. You basically just use nutrients, and you babysit all of these plants. Some of them obviously need something else besides just hydroponics, but it's certainly doable. Even cucumbers, tomatoes, they talk about this here. That's why I mention them. So Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey accused the minister of a let them eat turnips strategy, a reference to the 18th century French Queen Marie Antoinette, who supposedly responded to a bread shortage by saying let them eat cake. They ate her cake, so to speak. But Downing Street insisted Ms. Coffee had simply been, quote, setting out the importance of celebrating the produce that we grow here in the UK.
But as a consumer, they just want their tomatoes or whatever they normally buy.
My understanding is, what I've been told by others is that there is no shortage in other countries, so why is there a shortage here in the UK? Quote, we don't believe it's for us to tell people what they should or shouldn't buy, the Prime Minister's spokesperson said, but that's one person saying the opposite of what the other person is saying. Responding to a question from a fellow Tory MP about eating seasonal products, it's important to make sure that we cherish the specialisms that we have in this country. Sure. But why aren't we able to get lettuce and tomatoes and celery and carrots and everything else? Interestingly enough, though, there are a lot of people that have little backyard gardens that are fully capable of growing all of these things that are in short supply, and it's, subsistence farming. They have the ability to grow their own vegetables at a rate that's commensurate with their consumption. But a lot of people, they don't have time for this, so they need to be able to go and get it.
Well, and it becomes a convenience thing.
Yeah.
It's like we don't really know how to do it for ourselves anymore.
And they have a really shocking number, which it's definitely focused on the UK. I don't know right now what the food inflation rate is here in the United States. I'd have to go and look. But they say here in this article that food inflation is at a 45-year high, with grocery prices 16.7% higher than last year. Tack on to that the increase from the year before, and maybe you might be able to even tack on the price increase from 2020, and you're looking probably at a 30% increase. I'd say. I'd have to look for sure, but 16.7 in food costs alone I don't know how people are able to survive. This is a massive number to try and bear the burden on what uh, it's slightly different in the UK at a minimum wage, right? But entry level jobs may not be able to afford that. Here in the States, we know that entry level jobs can't afford that because they're already in the hole if they have an apartment that costs, 40% of their income.
Well, I suspect they have higher usage of things like food banks. I don't mean just in the UK, but I mean in general with the rising costs. It'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see stats on that.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you have people that are on the other side that are screaming that the public money shouldn't be going to these people. They should just get jobs. Right. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Just makes you want to puke. Anyway, let's move on to the next article. This one is. Oh, you know what? I didn't throw that last article into the chat. So let me do that real quick. This next article is in the Daily News Show. It's top. This is a massive URL, by the way. Top Fox News anchor says the company has banned coverage of the Dominion lawsuit that revealed how Tucker Carlson and other Fox stars privately dismissed election conspiracy theories while peddling them on air. And it's because, people really appreciate a hot mess. So they want to see this dumpster fire. And lo and behold, that's exactly what's going on. They peddled this dumpster fire of wingnut politics, and they made billions at the same time. Tucker Carlson and other Fox talking heads basically cheerled the whole wingnut side of things, and even to this day still do. Why? Because you don't get money when everybody is having a good time. You have to provoke some negative influence in people so that everybody picks a freaking side, and then you got people fighting, and you're literally the one that's selling the weapons to the people who normally would have just been getting along just fine. But your conspiracy marketing BS is what led us to where we are today. I mean, for crying out loud, QAnon formed from 4chan discussion boards because somebody thought that it would be cool to create something conspiratorial. And now it's a political party, for crying out loud. Nobody knows anything about this. Like who it was that actually started it. Just random conversation of a bunch of people on 4chan. I'm shocked that anybody would actually buy into this. It's all just wingnut conspiracy bullshit. Anyway, internal messages show Fox News anchors privately mock 2020 election conspiracy theories. Fox News' Howard Kurtz said on Sunday that the company had barred coverage of those messages, and as of Sunday, there were 0 stories on Fox News' website covering the messages and that lawsuit. And that lawsuit is to the tune of, I think, $1.5 billion. I think it's over $1 billion. I know that. Because that lawsuit is actually moving forward and naming names. So before, I'm sure, maybe the AI will jump in here at some point once I stop talking, I suppose. Top Fox News anchor says the company banned coverage. This article is over at businessinsider.com. Lloyd Lee is the author. This is Howard Kurtz at the Hill Extra and the Embassy of Canada celebrate the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend back in 2015. Now Howard Kurtz is smiling a little bit more nervously because I'm sure all of the wingnuts are trying to get his number. I don't think that they're going to talk about this lawsuit because it's akin to the the Rockettes and the skating rink. Well, we don't talk about that kind of stuff. We don't allow anybody to come that's even remotely associated with the lawsuit come in and interact with us, probably because somebody's gonna, all it takes is one question offhanded to get an answer that might compromise the integrity of the wall that they've built to prevent, the other side from getting actionable information. Everything has to be a subpoena. Everything has to be a court order, right? Anyway, a top Fox News anchor and his company was barred, and his company has barred coverage of the Dominion lawsuit, which recently received renewed attention after a 200-page motion. 200-page motion showed private texts between Fox stars and executives dismissing the 2020 election conspiracy peddled by Donald Trump and his supporters. During this period, people were finding out about these texts, by the way, these messages that are between the administrivia of Fox, and it's pretty amazing because what they said publicly is a polar opposite of what they were saying electronically, that everybody is freaking crazy and we shouldn't be covering this stuff, but they're doing it anyway.
Well, right. Isn't it all just a grab for views and, money ultimately? And I don't know. I don't think a news organization should be commenting on its own litigation, for example, but I also don't think a news organization should be banning coverage of news. That's a big problem.
Well, so it's really interesting because they get referred to as Fox News, but then in congressional hearings, they say, we're not news, we're entertainment. Well, okay, then strike news away from your thing and don't refer to yourself as news in any way, shape, or form. But meanwhile, they have local news organizations all harping the same string again and again and again. It's unsettling when others take all of this messaging that is being that's pandering to the public, just this populist conspiratorial wingnut bullshit, and you take all of these local TV stations and you line them up on a screen and they're all saying the same script. There's no independent reporting taking place. There's no independent journalistic integrity anymore, not with these mega owned news organizations. What needs to happen is, just like the Bells back in the late 80s, early 80s, it was broken up into baby bells and everybody was set out to defend themselves and compete for customers and couldn't be nationalized like that. They couldn't be this massive single entity. Well, then cell phones came into existence and they reconstituted as AT&T. Fox basically owns all of these organizations, these independent news stations that should be competing for their own existence in the various smaller markets. But because they are basically chanting the same mantra, they're getting funds from the overarching mega corporation Fox. There's something wrong here. It needs to be balkanized so that everybody is competing, and the only way that you can succeed is by providing the information, not the bullshit. Well, this sustained refrain about conspiracy is going to lead to, ultimately, a finding one way or the other in this case between Dominion and Fox, to the tune of $1.6 billion.
This is going to be an interesting suit to watch. I don't know how far along it is.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think that they're still doing some discovery. They're not actually scheduled for a courtroom yet. They talk about the tweets and or not tweets, but texts amongst the senior leadership of Fox. Arguably, I'm not sure who all is actually in this. Deep into this article, it says, though Kurt suggested the reason why he is not discussing the Dominion lawsuit is that the network is a defendant in an ongoing legal battle, this has not stopped other Fox anchors from disparaging electronic voting machines or mentioning Dominion. So they're allowed to poo-poo it, but they're not allowed to talk about the actual litigation, but they can sit there and marginalize Dominion, even though they're in a lawsuit. So
that doesn't make a lot of sense from if the company was actually trying to set out some policy to not run into problems. I mean, it just doesn't. Seems like they wouldn't be talking about it at all, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. But if they can get a jab in, then oh, well, that was just an incidental comment. One of the comments that Carlson made, Tucker Carlson, this is an actual threat to democracy, and it points up the core problem, which is we're really not very serious about democracy if we're using electronic voting machines. Even though there has never been any example of a electronic voting machine being successfully tampered with, there were people caught tampering with them, but there isn't any evidence. And a deeper dive into understanding the forensics that are involved with these voting machines has shown me, at least, that there is a software audit by a plurality of people. I no longer believe that the source code needs to be publicly distributed, although I think that now, because of the wingnut contingent, I think that releasing it into the wild would show greater transparency, and that I'm sure that the wingnuts will still say, well, just because you release this software doesn't mean it's the software that's on the machines. But we have the ability to forensically analyze if the software matches what gets distributed. I mean, we can create hashes that show no altered bits of a code base. So all of this is really just conspiracy theory, and I think there might be a comeuppance, so to speak, legal jargon,
that'll be the jury's finding, right?
Correct. There is going to be a comeuppance, will be the finding. My only concern really is that, for all intents, Senate is regulatory captured. So they're not going to sit there and say, y'all need to break up the news agencies. More people need to be in control of these things, and it has to be beyond arm's length because one person owns Fox, and that one person is controlling the messaging across the entire United States. Arguably, right? I mean, there's people that are in between, but it is one of the most watched networks. And then there are others as well, like MSNBC. I think that all needs to be broken up. No one person should be owning more than one station, like in a state, right? And that's how it was with radio stations. That's how it became with telephone. And then it became, as soon as telephone switched to cell, that regulation was hamstrung. Because they were no longer bound by geographic regions other than cell towers. Well, at any rate, we're going to end up watching this. I really hope that this is televised. I want this televised. Right now, they're televising some murder trial, and I would love this to be televised. I want to watch this because I want to see firsthand the evidence. I want to see the actual messaging that was being done. And the sad thing about that statement is that the people that need to watch it won't watch it. They'll be told that it's a kangaroo court and that it's all nothing but smoke and mirrors and lies and alternate facts. And depending on who you're talking to, it's alternate facts. It's just a crazy world. And starting with the time machine to slap the bad bat out of that Wuhan wet market, I want to go back and stop the Cubs from winning the World Series, because that's what fractured reality. And now we're in upside down. So anyway, you want to say anything else about this, or should I just move on?
Well, I would like people to actually watch people that are named in this article testify in this court proceeding, because maybe then they could see that their viewpoints were actually that this was not an issue, etc. But I agree, probably the people that need to watch it probably won't.
Yeah. The thing that I don't get is if a court orders me to come and testify, the chances of me walking away from that court order unscathed is 0. But a wingnut like Tucker Carlson can throw generational familial money. He was already a millionaire because of his generational wealth prior to him. All he did was skate in and not have to worry about anything else. Became a talking head and etc. But we're going to get into more of this because as we go, this actually ends up going down, kind of a spiral of, oh my God, there are people that do this. So let's keep on hustling. The next article is over in the Hatch Ideas channel as well. That channel, by the way, in the show is all about business, intellectual property, things like that. And, well, remote workers are still moving away from the office, and here's where they're going. We'll move this through really quick. Amanda Breen over at entrepreneur.com wrote this article. They're seeking slower paced lifestyles and lower costs of living continue to be the major draws. What was the one that we just did recently? They were an NFL player, blew out their knee, and now they're selling Pokemon cards and making millions. Yeah.
And in fact, ohmTown often has good articles about people shifting course or trying to go to something more low key.
Sometimes I find that the article is loaded in a way where a little bit of due diligence and peeling back the layers of the onion shows that it's a little bit of marketing, but that isn't really marketing. This guy was an NFL player, saved up money, blew out his knee, and then ended up selling Pokemon cards. So that's just a pivot of hard work. And being in the NFL is bust your ass, because it's a like 0.00002% chance of getting in the NFL, let alone surviving to retirement. Anyway, as of 2022, many U.S. remote workers weren't working from home out of necessity, but because they preferred it, 76% compared to 60% 2 years earlier. And nearly 20% said that they were working remotely because they'd relocated. In the case of Yelp's workforce, many employees are leaving large, expensive cities. The number of workers living near the company's San Francisco headquarters fell by 70%, and the number of those living near offices in New York, Washington, D.C., and Chicago dropped by 67%. What's interesting about this is the people are leaving the cities behind, but is their pay being nipped? On the way out of the state, your cost of living in San Francisco is dramatically higher compared to living in Arizona, or just, in any other state. It's cheaper to live in any other state than San Francisco or New York. So are their wages being lowered because they no longer have that cost of living that they have to adhere to, or were they compensated because of their skill set? I had a real conversation with somebody that suggested that wages should go down because they're teleworking, because they no longer have to drive in. And I had to remind them that you don't pay people because they are driving into work. You're paying them for the work product that they produce. If you zero that travel time, then they have a better work-life balance. They're happier.
They do their productive,
job. Exactly.
Probably less sick leave, etc.
Yeah. And you don't have to worry about them being tired when they come in. You don't have to worry about the wear and tear on their cars, and so they can't sit there and say, well, my car is broken. All kinds of things, right? But the work-life balance is increased on life part, and that maximizes the benefit for the work part. And there's even talk about turning the work-life balance into a 4-day work week, which actually resulted in greater productivity and a happier workforce.
No, amazing, right?
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Meanwhile, there are CEOs that'll sit there and say, no, everybody needs to be miserable and it needs to be kind of antagonistic. And then we're going to fire the bottom 20% and hire new people, because training people in a cultural environment that is in unity, everybody is thinking the same way and positive and seeking answers and maximizing their performance together. No, that's not good. You have to be antagonistic. At any rate, the pandemic showed that millions of people can work from anywhere, including, like, this picture is some guy in shorts on a dock with his computer, which I guarantee you is going to end up in the drink. The idea,
so
though,
much for that conference call.
yeah, really, dog ate my homework is now going to be my laptop ended up in the lake.
Oh, I thought it was going to be the fish ate my homework.
Oh, that's true too. Depends on the fish. So the way I see it is I'm paying people so that they do work product. And if their work product is failing, even in a remote environment, then you address the lack of work product. Not, oh, you have to come in because I want to be able to babysit you. Well, no, then we're all adults. And if the person isn't doing what they are asked as their job description entails, then you give them a performance improvement plan, and then you pip them out. Whatever you want to do, you make an adjustment. They get a chance. It would be their second chance, even if you want to do that power imbalance kind of a thing, because I gave you a chance at the job, which I had an administrator say that to me once. Hey, we gave you a job, and I'm like, no, buddy, you didn't give me anything. Anyway, I had to shrug that off, but at any rate, it really irritated me. If for whatever reason somebody isn't doing their job, you just address it. The first chance was the job itself. The second chance is you're not doing your job, and if you don't do your job, then you don't have a job. And if they don't do it, then they're gone. You find somebody else. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. You kind of have to work for a business. You don't just sit on the dock and go fishing. You actually do something. But you pay people to get it done. And if they get 40 hours worth of work product done in 10 hours, you know what you have there? A juggernaut, a dynamo. You've got somebody that's such a good asset to your company that you should probably make them an administrator so that they teach the other workers how to do it that fast. You don't go, well, you did 40 hours work of 10 hours. Now I can give you an additional 30 hours worth of work. No, now you're just an asshole. So I don't know if you have anything to say about this, but I think that we are all on the same page, right? That
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
we should be able to sit on a beach and do our job.
Absolutely. But I've seen a similar thing with maybe not telework specifically, but with remote workers where there's a discussion of paying less. And like, it's still the same job. I think they should be happy they don't have to pay for office space or utilities or whatever for the worker and just continue at the same salary.
Yeah, a lot of companies think that they have to own capital, that they have to own a building, and it's really fine. Go ahead and buy the building, but then just sit on it, write it off, and then when it goes up in value, sell it and buy another building that's of greater value. And you can be a real estate mogul while you're letting everybody else sit at home, happy to work and periodically have meetings. Have a powwow once a week and everybody goes back home after the powwow. Is that acceptable terminology now? Maybe not. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I'll look into it. But at any rate, we have about 4 more articles after this one, and I'm really soapboxing tonight, so I hope everybody is okay with that. The next article is in the continuity report. Let me throw that in the chat. And this one is in the continuity report because of the source. It's from Variety. And Dilbert cartoonist Scott Adams dropped by syndication partner after he said white people should get the F away from black people. Now, I can't really go into this. I really think that I'm going to have to do maybe in office hours, and I'll talk about this. We'll see. We'll see if I can pull this together. I know that I got a lot of meetings tomorrow. I am the mayor of ohmTown, so I'm working all the time. But I would love to go into a deeper historical dive into Scott Adams, who I can probably, if there were different niches for people to be placed, he could be ensconced in the wingnut side of things at this point, based on my understanding of Scott Adams and his history. Dilbert, when I was younger, was awesome, and it didn't seem to include anything that had even the context of a racial divide or racial issues or whatever. But apparently Scott Adams had been dropped from other stuff several years ago because his cartoon, and it's in newspapers for crying out loud, he started tilting towards a racial theme, and they booted him. And then he said, well, I'm going to be unemployed within 5 years at some point because newspapers are going away. And he just kind of leaned into this batshit crazy racial whatever. And I'm like, you're a cartoonist, dude. Do what you do, but unless you are a political cartoonist that has the context on the right side of things, you are going to be unemployed, other than from the wingnut contingent, because everything that I've been reading about this dude says racist without being racist. You know, he's sitting there saying, stay away from black people. And I'm like, dude, you're racist. How can you not see that what you are saying and doing is racism? It's weird. He just doesn't see it. The optics just don't. For a cartoonist, he can't see. Scott Adams' racist rant has resulted in the Dilbert cartoonist losing his deal with syndication partner Andrews McMeel Universal. In a statement late Sunday, Andrews McMeel said it was severing our relationship with Adams, which the company originally struck in 2011, including all areas of our business with Adams and the Dilbert comic strip.
Well, I think that's the right move, but I mean, what? I don't know.
Todd Spangler over at Variety.com put this article together, and here is Dipshit and Dilbert. Scott Adams goes on this racist rant. If you pull up his Wikipedia, and then from there you follow other news and just do a search, a general search, you'll find out all of what I have found out. He tweeted, my syndication partner canceled me, and Dilbert has been canceled from all newspapers, websites, calendars, and books because I gave some advice everyone agreed with. No, everyone is just your little echo chamber of wingnuts. He literally said, okay, so one of the things that was found here is on February 22nd, an episode of his YouTube show, Adams cited a recent survey by conservative polling company Rasmussen reports that found that 53% of black people surveyed agreed with the statement, it's okay to be white. The Anti-Defamation League has labeled the phrase a hate symbol that was popularized in late 2017 as a trolling campaign on 4chan. Again, 4chan. Anyway, I've looked at that poll, and there were knock-on ones of that poll, and the numbers aren't right. It's okay to be white. I don't think that they verified who it was that said that they were black. And so this is basically, I think that this is, it's nothing. Because I don't think anybody is going to sit there, and no one willingly, without context, should be answering the question, is it okay to be white? Well, it's okay to be who you are. It doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter. You just be who you are, right? And I will embrace your unique, and you embrace my unique elements, and together, we can all be great. But this polarity creating bullshit language that Dilbert is using, I say Dilbert because everybody really knows Dilbert. It is creating a greater and greater rift. And then he goes but he's been saying this for years now. You really do have to do a deeper dive. So maybe I can put something together. Although every time I think about this, my stomach turns a little bit, because this kind of stuff was going away. We were, as a society, stuffing it under a rock and saying, just society is sick of your shit, right? And now they're calling it canceling. No, we're not canceling anything. We're tired of your shit. So if you want to coin it as canceling, just know that it's society as a whole that's turning your wrong-headed ideological bent away. Stuff it back under the rock.
And the whole impetus for any action is because somebody's espousing hate speech or, inciting negative actions against other groups. That is the triggering event. It's not the people that are calling it out as not being okay.
Yeah, I mean, people are literally responding to the historical context of racism and hate. They're speaking out against that, and that's being frowned upon, which is so absurd. How do you not realize that you're trying? It's like these anti-Antifa people. I'm like, you know what that means, right? Antifa means anti-fascist. How can you be
anti is actually fascist, right?
They're pro-fascism if you're anti-Antifa. I know that double negatives are really, really hard for some people, but for crying out loud, it's pretty damn obvious. And that's part of this, right? Like, if you are espousing hate speech and racism and trying to victimize somebody, and others stand up and tell you pardon me, I have to put my filter on, you're a wingnut and you should shut the hell up and just draw your cute comic, it's made him a multimillionaire. And it just goes in line with what I've been saying for a decade now. As you approach separation of the fiscal contract in society, you and I arguably are at the same level of everything. But when I have so much money that I can distance myself from the impact of me being an idiot online, I can say and do whatever I want, and I'm untouchable. Well, his millions are making millions by investment, and he's fiscally untouchable. We could cancel him until the cows come home, and he's still going to be a millionaire, and he can still say his stupid shit. And it's empowering the sociopathy of those people, when they're so far away from with money, they're so far away from society, they can do whatever they want. Anyway, let's move on to the next article. This one is federal judge handcuffs a crying 13-year-old girl attending her father's hearing. This is over in the Word and Law. Today's word is what now? I know it's 2 words, but you merge them together and it's 1 word. What now? Absolutely shocking abuse of authority. This is an article over in Above the Law. We'll go through this really quick. Joe Patrice over at Above the Law wrote this article. Again, it's titled Federal Judge Handcuffs Crying 13-Year-Old Girl Attending Father's Hearing. So, I'll go through it real quick. Sound good? Okay. So, yeah, again, you send the affirmative message, but you actually have to let everybody know.
Yes, that sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the synthesizer's still working. Okay, so person standing before a judge, getting sentenced, potentially trying to speak to the judge and say, move me somewhere else so that we can move my family away from here so that they aren't influenced by the same circles that he had established. And the judge decides to turn to the U.S. Marshal and ask if he has cuffs, then orders the Marshal to cuff the 13-year-old and walk them across the courtroom to the jury box. And then I'll scroll down a little bit so that I can quote exactly what was said here. The Marshal cuffed the girl behind her back, had her crying, and walked over to the jury box, and after a long pause, told her he did not allow her to return to her seat, and instead said, "Don't go away, look at me." And, okay, so my stomach starts churning because I start walking through this and I know what's coming. He asked her how he liked sitting up there, and she said through tears, I didn't like it. And he says, the way those cuffs felt on you. And she responds, I didn't like it. And then he says that you're an awfully cute young lady after having the cuffs on her. And that if she didn't stay away from drugs, that she'd wind up in cuffs and be right back where he put her a minute ago. Absolutely twisted. I mean, the ethics of this seems obviously wrong here, that this person's ethical compass is wrong, but they're a sitting judge. So I guess they have some leeway as to what they can do in this.
But yes, this isn't a person that's before them in the court. That is, I think, the most key fact here, even beyond the person's age. They're not a defendant.
Oh, and I didn't even read further down the author of this, so let me make sure that I say their name again. Joe Patrice. Joe Patrice said what I just said. So this is some Bush League scared straight. Okay, that's what they said. Because whenever you see one of those stunts, the kid's either already in juvenile hall or the parents have consented to have the kids subjected to that treatment. They don't pluck kids out of an audience and humiliate them. Also, telling a 13-year-old that she's awfully cute after handcuffing her reads more like a scene from a horror movie than something that should emanate from the bench. I mean, it's shocking to me. Anyway, it says at the very end, meanwhile, Judge Benitez, and that's who the judge was that was doing all of these shenanigans with marshals and cuffs and 13-year-old girl, remains busy putting the final touches on what is expected to be a ruling obliterating California gun laws. I guess and this is the author saying all of this, I guess if you think it's fine to torture children in the courtroom, there's no reason to worry about school shootings either. This is just no punches pulled.
The AI is speechless. I mean, this is probably the worst reported behavior of a judge that we've seen in the news. Short of like a violent crime against somebody or something, but
yeah. Well, and even then, I mean, it's not involving a 13-year-old girl getting handcuffed and paraded before a court. I mean, it's so sick and twisted. And yeah, like Joe says in the article, They don't just pluck random people off the street and cuff them and parade them around and try and scare them straight. Anyway, I'm sure we will hear about this judge again, probably in reference to this interaction. If I were the parents, I would probably appeal and say, I think my time should be served so that I can move and save my kid after this type of abuse from the court. The next article is in the Mobile channel, and it says Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, calls for declassifying documents showing that COVID came from a Chinese lab. If you haven't been paying attention, some report had come out from the Department of Energy, or no, it's now called the Energy Department, and refers to the fact that there apparently is a low confidence level that it was leaked from the Wuhan lab that was about a mile away from the wet market, where everybody says that that's where the bad bat was. And I kind of decided to, was it yesterday or the day before? I basically constructed a little story. I constructed a little story that, somebody from this Institute of Virology in Wuhan decided to take a little vial and walk over to that wet market and squirt a little on a good bat and make it a bad bat. And then somebody munched that bad bat. And so now, instead of me having to build a time machine and go back and slap a bad bat out of somebody's mouth, I have to go back a little bit further and slap a bad vial of Wuhan COVID-19 out of somebody's hand. Anyway, the claim is, and it's the article is over at the Hill. My goodness, I gotta pause it. Over at the Hill.
Does not want to pause.
Yeah. Alexander Bolton is the author of this. I don't know if there's a relation to Michael Bolton, but I don't know. Anyway, classified documents leaked, and they should be classified, showing scientists at DOE believe COVID leaked from Wuhan lab, Paul tweeted on Monday, circulating a Wall Street Journal story published over the weekend reporting the Energy Department has concluded the COVID-19 pandemic likely came from a lab leak. It actually has low confidence, but I need to see this report. This needs to be disclosed to the public in a more definitive way than just some article at the Wall Street Journal. It needs to be disclosed. And I think the Wall Street Journal should actually publish that document. If they've got that document, they should they should publicly post it because it's definitely has societal impact. Because if the wool has been pulled over society's eyes about the source of this, well, let's just say there needs to be a comeuppance here as well, because there is a lot going on behind the scenes. The budget that afforded what could be, what is it called? Do you remember the term?
Gain of function research.
Gain of function was, or I should say, is tied to the NIH. And that money was given to various institutions, including someone that's referred to as the Bat Lady. So I think that there's a good chance that this actually came from a lab where they were figuring out how to combat influenza, but they gave it function, which naturally would not have occurred. And so it was a whole lot harder to eradicate, and somebody let it loose. And I made the claim yesterday. You'll have to go back and watch that video if you want to hear it. I tend not to just keep on belaboring a particular conspiracy theory, and it's of my own creation. But can you imagine if the gain of function was actually created in Wuhan, funded by the NIH through budget line items that say you can do this during a moratorium of gain of function experimentation in various labs, and Fauci was involved, apparently. And you can actually do a search because it was talked about in Congress, and the hearings were public, and other things, other events that were talking about gain of function for viruses was talked about. And it's public, it's on YouTube, it's not something that is hidden or just somebody like me just talking about the news. It actually exists. Anyway, the U.S. intelligence community is split on the conclusion that the deadly virus leaked from a Chinese lab. 4 other agencies believe that it likely jumped to humans from an animal host outside the lab. It doesn't really freaking answer the question about where it came from. Those findings are also reportedly made with low confidence. It says here the CIA hasn't made a judgment on whether the virus sprung from a lab or naturally from another animal host. If it isn't a natural virus, it was man-made, and it got onto an animal and traversed the animal-human gap that way, it doesn't matter that it came from an animal. It came from the lab.
Right.
And the bad bat came from the lab. You know?
Well, we won't know unless they declassify the report.
That's right. So I agree, as much as I don't really find the wingnut contingent of politics favorable to agree with, I think that this should be exposed. This should be discussed publicly. Wuhan, which is located about 500 miles west of Shanghai, is home to the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products. Maybe a bad bat is one of those bad products. And in 2021, it refused to cooperate with a World Health Organization effort to study the possibility that COVID-19 leaked from a lab. Why would they? They probably already know. You want to add anything else?
No, I don't have anything else.
So the last article for today is in the Hatch Ideas channel, and it's a man documents insane list of excessive rules plastered all over Hampton's Airbnb. This one just sounds funny. An Airbnb in Montauk, New York is being scrutinized for its rather specific list of guest rules. It's over at entrepreneur.com. Emily Rella is the author of this. It has a big picture that was posted to TikTok, a guest rule plastered on the wall of one of the home's bathrooms. Please do not spray, apply perfume, cologne, or body oils inside studio. Please apply outside. Thank you. Let's see. The video, which has more than 614,000 views, shows the man walking through the property and stopping each time there's a piece of paper with a different rule that are a little insane for staying in the home. It's just excessive. Anywhere you literally go, there's a sign. The rules shown, but most likely are not limited to, are no smoking or vaping, no spraying perfume inside the home. Hot showers are limited to 8 minutes maximum, and being required to leave the shower door open after showering to prevent mold.
I think the idea of going around the house and finding all the rules was kind of funny. Like it could be a scavenger hunt.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. That many signs, that person definitely has a hidden camera somewhere, one user mused. Enough signs to make you feel unwelcome and nervous, another pointed out. I will never use an Airbnb, and I'll never Airbnb my place. First, it's because I don't want people just noodling around wherever in my space. Maybe if I have some other property, I'll Airbnb it. But then it's a rental. You have rental properties. Airbnb, I don't know. I'm never going to use Airbnb. Those little cameras can be anywhere. Anywhere. There's a mic right there, by the way, just so that you don't think that I'm too weird.
That's too late.
Airbnb was down just over 18% in 1 year period as of late Monday afternoon. So their stock's taking a hit. Yeah, I don't know. You're in AI, so you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. I don't want to end up on a Airbnb OnlyFans. That'll never happen. Imagine that site. Only Airbnbs.
It probably, or be careful, it might get out there.
Somebody might actually create it. All right, folks, that is it for ohmTown Daily News Show. 11 articles. And all you have to do is walk over to ohmTown.com. It's a big road. Everything leads to ohmTown. And from there, you can go into all of the articles. And don't forget, come over to twitch.tv/ohmTown. Of course, you can go over to YouTube too. I don't know. You think about streaming to both? We could do that, I suppose. Okay. I guess we're done for tonight. Thank you, everybody who is downloading the podcast and watching here on Twitch and over on YouTube. Awesome. Thank you so much. Be sure to go over to ohmTown.com, become a citizen. Okay, that's it. You want to say bye?
Good night, ohmTown citizens, and we'll see you again tomorrow night.
I just looked at my mixer and I saw a red light on my mic.
Does that mean what I think it means?
Yep. See ya.